Wire countdown on a possible government shutdown.
The Democrats see this as their maximum leverage so they can get DACA.
Actions speak louder than words. Get the dreamers safety here in America.
The Democrats need to get over it.
As an American citizen, to watch this is repulsive.
They're calling it a house of horrors. Several children found starving, chained to beds.
The parents arrested after one of their daughters, a brave young girl, escaped to call police.
Her 12 brothers and sisters were being held by their parents.
A major update on the Uranium One scandal. The federal authorities have now announced an indictment in the Russian bribery scheme.
The Obama administration is allowing corrupt people to have a quantity of material that they could sell for big bucks.
And the question is they're going to follow up with Hillary Clinton?
5-year-old Tavares Jones breaking it down in front of a sellout crowd as the Cavs took on the Golden State Warriors.
From the mezzanine level of Studio F, it's in Fox and Friends. Welcome aboard. It's Hour 3.
Hour 3, the show's flying by.
It is indeed.
And listening to Bruno Mars, I still believe best halftime show that I've seen at the Super Bowl.
Hands down.
He was so good.
He was good. And this year it's going to be Pink?
Justin Timberlake.
Pink
is singing.
Timberlake. And,
it rhymes with Pink.
Right.
Timberlake.
But this is going to be his first appearance since he pulled off Janet Jackson's top. And why Janet Jackson doesn't get to go back and he does is unbelievable.
Hadn't really thought about it that way.
Right. And Pink is going to sing the national anthem.
That's what I remember. All right.
Hey, why don't we move on and talk some politics?
Okay.
Good idea. President Trump firing back at Democrat Senator Dick Durbin.
The commander-in-chief blasting Durbin for, quote, misrepresenting what he said during an Oval Office meeting on DACA.
All of this as a government shutdown looms with still no DACA deal in sight. Griff Jenkins breaking it all down for us in Washington. Just a few more days. Friday's the deadline, right, Griff?
That's right. You know, if it feels like we're facing a government shutdown every week, it's because this is the 4th time since September we've been here, but this time may be different. Gone is the goodwill of that bipartisan meeting that we all watched last week. Now the president says Democrats don't even want to make a deal as Senator Dick Durbin and the president clash over what the president did or did not say in a meeting. Now we have a new nickname. The president tweeting, Senator Dickie Durbin totally misrepresented what was said at the DACA meeting. Deals can't get made when there is no trust. Durbin blew DACA and is hurting our military. But Durbin, responsible for revealing the S-hole controversy in the first place, is defending his allegations.
I stand behind every word that I said in terms of that meeting. I'm focused on one thing, not that meeting, but on making sure that those who are being protected by DACA and eligible for the DREAM Act have a future in America.
Now, complicating any hope that a bipartisan deal is still possible, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has made it clear she won't support a funding bill without a DACA deal. But House Republicans say Democrats need to get over the idea of a clean DACA deal without the president's priorities. Meanwhile, this growing list of Democrats, 5 in all, led by Maxine Waters, has announced they will boycott the president's State of the Union speech in 2 weeks. Bottom line, no deal by Friday, and Democrats hold out on funding. It could be time to turn out the lights in the building behind me. Republicans in the House might be able to go it alone, but not in the Senate, where they'll need 9 Democrats to avoid a filibuster, guys.
That's right, Griffin. They need to find some motivated Democrats to help them out on that. We thank you very much. So really, the deadline is not on DACA. The deadline is on funding the government, and it looks as if, from what we've read, it looks like they're probably going to pass a little patch, get them down the road a couple of weeks, and they probably will be able to motivate a number of Democrats to do it, because they'll also include some disaster relief and some social programs.
I have a prediction. The patch would show maturity on both sides, because it helps the country if they find 2 more weeks to fund the government, because they have no agreement on this. But I have a prediction. I sense that if they agree to work towards a bipartisan solution, they'll have a reason to get Democrats involved, and they'll have 2 more weeks to get this done.
I think you're right. I think if they agreed, hey, let's come up with some sort of comprehensive immigration reform, rather than doing a continuing resolution and tacking DACA onto it, they'll all be focused on that. And the president gave them until March to figure out what to do about DACA, so why not?
they're not going to shut down the government. They can't do that. And
they might.
They've done it like, what was it, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? They've done it once.
Did it? Remember when the computers didn't work for the launch of Obamacare? And that ended up, the #1 story was the shutdown of the government, and the president made that remark like, hey, bad timing.
It's an election year, and if Democrats shut down the government, don't you think that's going to affect them come the polls in November?
It always impacts the Republicans more, because the Democrats will say, look, we shut it down because we were trying to get something done for the Dreamers, and the Republicans shut it down. So it's one of those things, even though Democrats may be at fault, the Republicans would wind up getting the blame, and that's why Paul Ryan said on Friday he's optimistic that they'll be able to do something.
Well,
shut the government down.
And Steve, 32 Democrats voted last time before Christmas not to fund the government.
Yeah.
So you wonder if that number is going to grow now, and using the president's controversial remarks that people are debating what he said as a reason to say his stance on race is something I can't tolerate, but it'd be a very big risk for Democrats who feel like they're on a roll heading to the midterms, even that the chance they're going to get blamed for the reason to be
Stephen
shut
Colbert
down.
back in 2013, Stephen Colbert, I'm sorry, he was on, Chuck Schumer was on with Stephen Colbert, and we're going to play that soundbite, but Chuck Schumer back in 2013 said that it was governmental chaos when you use immigration reform to try to shut down the government, when you use that, when people's lives and their paychecks are at risk. He was on with Stephen Colbert last night. Listen to what he said.
Actions speak louder than words. You want to just begin that long road back to proving you're not a racist, you're not bigoted. Support the bipartisan compromise that 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats have put on the floor. Everyone gave. If you're going to listen to the farthest right, we will never have an immigration policy. They're not where America is, and they're not even where the Republican Party is. You can't let a small group on the extreme govern.
And Senator Schumer has known President Trump for years. When he was asking him for money, he knows the president's not a racist. So for him to say, you have to prove it to me, to sit on Stephen Colbert's couch and say that is almost comical.
And to say, we gave you this bipartisan deal. The bipartisan deal was not what Republicans wanted. It was $1 billion for the wall, and the president's been asking for a lot more than that. I think they needed more than $3 million in the initial phase of the wall.
But I would like to think that's the foundation, Ainsley, to maybe build, because there was Senator Graham was in there, Senator Perdue was in there. There's been some other, Senator Lamar Alexander's going to join in the fray. So they did work together towards this for the last 2 months. So my hope was they'd say, yeah, this doesn't work yet, but we'll push it forward.
But the president made it very clear at the beginning of the week what he wanted, and only one of the things was in there, and it was only partially in there. Mark Levin took a look at what's been going on over the last 48 hours and what's been going on over the last couple of weeks, and had this observation.
As an American citizen, to watch this is repulsive. To watch the mob media do what they're doing. Last week we were told the president was mentally unstable. For months before that, we're told he's colluding with the Russians. Today we're told he's a racist. What happened to that author, Michael Wolff? 3 days ago he was the in thing. Now he's gone. Now we're on to something new, because a known liar, Dick Durbin, leaves a confidential meeting with the president and other senators. He's relied on by the media because they want to rely on him, just like they wanted to rely on that author. They want to push this president out. They talk about the 25th Amendment. They talk about impeachment.
Now you know why I cannot wait for Mark Levin's show to start on Sundays.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be fantastic.
All right. Meanwhile, the Media Research Center has come out with a study. They looked at the coverage on the big 3 networks, their evening news, and take a look at the screen. The line at the top is the amount of negative coverage. And as you can see, it hovered around 90% regarding President Trump the entire year. And the positive coverage is at line scraping the bottom. It started at 15%, and then it went 9, 9, 18, 7, 10, 8. To say the least, the president has not gotten good coverage from the big 3 networks.
Look at that. What happened in April? It was 82% was negative. A lot better than 90%.
Right, that's fantastic.
Right? Look at that. Now, there are 25 million people that watch these 3 networks. So when they're covering this presidency, 90% negative coverage, 25 million people are watching it every night.
But believe it or not, through all this negative coverage, they did a survey of 600,000 people about how Black America views this president. His numbers have actually doubled. in approval. It's still low. It's around 25%, but it's doubled since the election. So they're seeing something maybe in their pocketbooks or their job opportunities, because we know that unemployment for African American or Black Americans are now is under 7% for the first time ever.
So when you look at their bar graphs, I think you could say easily not exactly fair and balanced. Should be closer to 50, but instead it's closer to 90 and 10.
Right, and the president let us know that if he doesn't like the coverage, he's going to let you know. And I think a lot of people are taking his presidency personal.
Maybe they'll watch you, Steve, and they'll change for 2018. What do you think?
I would say that's a no.
All right, let's hand it over to Jillian.
I'm not going to hold my
headlines
breath.
for us. Hey, Jillian.
Good
Jillian's
Tuesday
always
morning.
positive.
Always.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. We do have a Fox News alert to get to, though, guys. Let's get you caught up on the story we've been following for a few hours now. 4 law enforcement officers shot overnight in South Carolina. Deputies responding to a domestic violence call in York County. That's actually just outside Charlotte, North Carolina. The suspect, Christian Thomas McCall, started running before cops got there. Police say he shot a K-9 officer when they tracked him down and opened fire on 3 deputies hours later. Their conditions all still unknown.
Really use your prayers. And we could really use your thoughts right now for those officers.
The suspect also shot, still no word on a motive. Also breaking, a very disturbing report out of California. They're calling it a house of horrors. David and Louise Turpin accused of holding their 13 children captive in one room, some of them starving and chained to beds. Police making the discovery about 30 miles outside of San Bernardino after one of their brave daughters escaped to call 911. Authorities say the siblings range in age from 2 to 29. Their parents facing several charges, including torture and child abuse, and are being held on a $9 million bond. Still ahead, a live report outside the horrifying scene in California later this hour. Turning now to extreme weather. Another winter storm is on the way. Frigid temperatures causing massive mountains of thick ice to pile up more than 30 feet on Lake Erie. And icy roads causing a close call for police in Kentucky. Ooh, look at that video dash cam capturing a car sliding down a road and slamming into a parked police car. And snow coming down overnight north of Houston, Texas. The winter weather now pushing to the east. More than 700 flights have been canceled nationwide. Let's look at your headlines, so got to brace yourselves again, guys.
I know.
Here we go again.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Jillian.
Coming up, a 40-year-old mom and marathon runner dies days after being diagnosed with the flu. The CDC now sounding the alarm.
Plus, a new indictment in the Uranium One scandal. What could it mean for Hillary Clinton? Yeah, that story next.
An indictment handed down in the Uranium One scandal. Mark Lambert, a former Maryland transit firm executive, accused of bribing Russians for nuclear contracts. But as our next guest points out in a new op-ed, the press has largely ignored it and adds any allegations of a Clinton campaign connection still deserve to be fully investigated. Here to explain, constitutional law professor at George Washington University, Jonathan Turley. Good morning to you, Professor.
Hi, Steve.
Okay, so you're saying that as long as they're looking into the collusion thing and Paul Manafort's getting in trouble, why not look at the Clintons, right?
Well, I think that there are a lot of allegations that haven't been fully investigated. I don't understand people who are in favor of investigating the Russian collusion connections with Trump are opposed to fully investigating these allegations. Hundreds of millions of dollars were given to the Clinton Foundation or to the Clintons personally. Even the Washington Post, which has resisted these investigations, says that it believes that the Russians gave this money to influence Hillary Clinton.
Sure.
So the question is, did it work? And why wouldn't we want to investigate that?
Because on its face, Professor, it looks like it worked. And so if it did work, why don't we figure out why don't we connect those dots? Who is so afraid to dig into this thing?
Well, you know, I'm still skeptical that there's any criminal case here against the Clintons on Uranium One. I think that a lot more has to be established for a credible nexus. But I think that what this indictment shows is the different treatment being given these allegations. You know, the public has very little faith in our government. And you can't necessarily promise answers, but you can give them a full record. And I think at this point, the only way we're going to get past this awful period, this terrible election, is to fully investigate both sides. And that's what I just don't understand, why people are resisting one side but not the other.
You know, it was Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, a number of weeks ago. He said, you know, at the behest of a number of Republican congressmen and senators, said, you know what, maybe we'll look into it, the Uranium One deal, and if there are any charges to be brought, we'll deal with that. And people are wondering, you know, is this indictment of Mark Lambert, is that a byproduct of that, or were they digging all along?
My assumption is that they were digging all along. You don't produce an indictment like this in such fast order after the statement by Sessions. So the assumption is that this investigation was ongoing. Why it took 3 years, I don't know. I mean, they're alleging that bribes not only occurred, but there was a pattern of code words used to hide this money. Yeah. It's a pretty damning record. But I think that the most important question is not just Uranium One, but to look at all of this money that went to the Clintons. You know, Hillary Clinton said that they were dead broke leaving the government. They ultimately amassed a fortune of over $150 million.
Yeah.
That was a reckless decision in terms of the money that they accepted from some of these sources, and it warrants investigation.
And why not? And because there are scandals on both sides, you know, the public's never going to be satisfied until we get some answers.
I think that that's what people of good faith should basically accept, that we've never had a period like this where there's so many questions about our leaders, and it requires us to give the public the information they need to make their own decisions and stop trying to manipulate both sides of the investigation. People are going to be embarrassed if both sides are investigated, but it's the only way I can see for us getting out of this period.
All right, Professor, thank you very much for dropping by today.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. 8:20 now here in New York City. Just across the river is New Jersey, and New Jersey's new governor is going to be sworn in just a couple of hours. His first order of business, protecting illegal immigrants. We're going to tell you about that. Plus, a new book reveals what the late Antonin Scalia, the justice at the Supreme Court, really thought about candidate Donald Trump. The author of Nino and Me, who knew Scalia for decades, joins us next.
Time now for your headlines, starting with a Fox News alert. 3 churches firebombed on Pope Francis's first day in Chile. One of them burned just south of Santiago, where the Pope is this morning. 9 churches have been attacked in Chile since Friday. It's not clear who is behind these burnings. And leaders of the Free Syrian Army meeting with President Trump today, hoping for support against deadly attacks from the Assad regime and threats from Russia and Iran. This as Syrian citizens might be victims of another gas attack. Doctors treating a half-dozen people for breathing problems after a missile strike.
Wow. Get to the bottom of that.
Meanwhile, unfiltered and utterly frank. That's how Antonin Scalia described then candidate Donald Trump, according to the author of a fascinating new memoir about the late Supreme Court justice.
Joining us now is the author of the new book. It's called Nino and Me, My Unusual Friendship with Justice Antonin Scalia. Thank you so much, Brian Garner, for being with us. Brian just wrote this new book. We just showed you a picture of it. Brian, why is it called Nino and Me?
Well, it's the story of our friendship. It's really a book about 3 things. It's a book about friendship, it's a book about literary collaboration, and it's a book about truly the most interesting man in the world.
Wow. And you met him because you wanted to interview him to do a book on him, right?
That's right. I had written a lot of books myself, over 20 or so when we met, and he was fascinated by my book authorship. And so much so that after 2 meetings, I thought that maybe we could do a book together.
And he said, ultimately he said no, though, right?
Well, no, he said yes, and then he said no. It was kind of it was a turbulent start.
Sure.
We had a little misunderstanding. I had sent him some blank pages to develop manuscript, and he thought that that was going to be the finished book, and that I was rejecting all of his contributions. So it was actually a very difficult thing to sort out. And there were some very tense conversations involving some accusations leveled against me.
Okay.
But, you know, I've called him he is sort of a combination of Socrates and Dr. Samuel Johnson in the modern era. And I don't know of anybody else whose mind is quite as acute and whose view of the world is quite as clear as Justice Scalia's was. It was an amazing experience to be able to work with him and be his friend.
Okay, so with that kind of intellect, why did he like Donald Trump?
I think he liked an unvarnished candidate. This was early days in the campaign. So I'm certainly not, commenting on what he would make of the political situation today. But early on, he was enthusiastic about the idea that we had a candidate whose every utterance was not airbrushed.
But I know you also wrote a book about Neil Gorsuch, and you would have appeared, you appear to really like him and think he's a fine justice. Maybe you could answer this for me. Where did the confidence come from? Where did his confidence, his assuredness in everything he seems to have thought, and his deep thinking, how do you, did it ever make sense to you?
Well, the only way I can put that together, he had a very clear vision and a lot of confidence, you're right. I think it had to do with his upbringing. He was an only child with a lot of aunts and uncles, all of whom he said were dedicated to his development, his education. He was doted on as a child. And I think his parents inculcated in him a very strong sense of ethics, of morality, and he lived that. He was a man of great integrity.
Brian, I assume Nino is his nickname or what you called him. I'd love to hear more about that. And something else that we might learn in the book that we didn't know as the public. We researched him. We all reported on his unfortunate death last year. But what's something we don't know about him?
Well, he had an uncle named Nino. Antonino was his name, and so his nickname Nino came from his uncle. I called him Justice Scalia for about the first 6 months of our collaboration. He had a sense of drama, and it was over at his house when I was first having dinner with him in his home that he called me aside and said, rather dramatically, Brian, I don't think we're going to be able to continue working together. Now, this was after we had already almost broken up, and I was devastated. And he said, if you keep on calling me Justice Scalia, I'm Nino. And that was a very big change in the relationship. I think what a lot of people, very few people have a sense of the man. And that was really the purpose of the book, to memorialize him and write a tribute to the man, but also to share with the world, among people who are interested in this fascinating man, just what was he like day to day? What was it like to appear on stage with him? What was it like to write books with him? And that was the purpose of writing the book, really.
Did he have a sense that his days were numbered? I mean, it seems sudden to us. For him, did he feel healthy?
Yes. In fact, when we returned to the United States 8 days before he died, he was in good health. In fact, we commented on the fact that none of us had had a cold in this long tour of Asia over a 2-week period. There's a very eerie thing that I recount at the end of the book. We did discuss when his death would occur in 2 conversations. One, I said, I know you're going to live for another 20 years, but you need to have a literary executor. And so we had that conversation. I recount that in the book. But the most remarkable thing was 9 days before he died, we were at a Taoist temple in Hong Kong, and he was fascinated by a soothsayer stall, a soothsayer, which is a fortune teller. Right. And I said, let's go get our palms read. And my wife and I, Caroline and I, went and got our palms read. And the palm reader actually predicted the date of the year of my death, that he said I would live to be 89 easily. I don't know what the easily means. Right. And that my wife would live to be 88 easily.
Real quick.
And I said, Nino, get your palm read. Let's get your palm read. And he said no, and he started walking off. I said, come on, Nino, let's find out if he knows how many children you have, because he was also correctly predicting the number of children we had.
He didn't do it.
And he said, absolutely not. I do not want to know when I'm going to die.
Brian
and
Garner.
that happened 9 days
Wow.
before.
Congratulations on the book, Nino and me. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to join us next, so stay with us on Fox and Friends.
At Safe Flight Auto Glass.
All right, 25 minutes before the top of the hour. Now it's time to go inside that building, actually just outside that building of the White House, where Press Secretary Sarah Sanders is, where it is going to get warmer a little bit, but it is a little bit challenging now to be out there. Thanks so much for joining us, Sarah. I got to ask you, a lot of people are nervous about a government shutdown in a few days. You're going to talk about FISA today on Capitol Hill as the Senate comes back to work. Is there any thought or any planning to reconfigure and reconvene that bipartisan meeting that you had last Thursday that went so wrong?
First of all, good morning. And it is very cold, so hopefully we stay short today. But look, we're still optimistic in terms of the budget deal. I think one thing needs to be clear. We have to keep these two items separate. For the budget needs to be a separate item. We want a clean budget bill. We're still hopeful that that can happen. We hope that the Democrats will not hold American military hostage, will not hold the funding of our government hostage over a political battle that we should have, but we shouldn't have it connected to the budget. We need to keep those two things separate. We're still hopeful that we can get a budget deal done, a clean budget by the end of this week, and certainly hope that we can make a deal on DACA and on border security and our immigration system. This is something that needs to be done. Everyone agrees, both Democrats and Republicans, the House and the Senate and the President, that we want to see something on DACA. We want to see border security. It seems like a no-brainer, and hopefully Democrats will come to the table and really be serious about making a deal on both of these things that we want to get done.
What's the problem? What is the issue that's holding this up?
Sadly, I think it's really simple. I think Democrats don't want to see this president be successful. I think that he has had a huge year of 2017, one of the best first years of any president that we've seen, certainly with the massive legislation passed, with the tax cuts. The economy is booming. ISIS is in retreat. I mean, you have win after win after win with this president, and I don't think they want to hand him another one. The problem is what they're doing is they're penalizing the country, and that's a really, really sad thing, and hopefully Democrats will stop doing that, and they'll start putting their country before their party and really focus on things that they were elected to come here and do, and that is work with Republicans to get good legislation passed, and our budget and funding our military is first and foremost has to be done. And even a lot of Democrats over the weekend, the Attorney General of California, multiple other members, Senator Whitehouse, have said this needs to be a clean deal. It shouldn't be tied to DACA, and we hope Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi will join with some of their Democratic colleagues this week and make that happen.
Well, last week, the White House made it very clear what the president would like to see in any deal, and then that bipartisan idea came up, and it wasn't even close.
And people act like we should have that the president is outrageous for not jumping on to a bad deal. This is a president who's been bashing bad deals for the last 2 years. The last thing he's going to do is sign on to another one. He is very much committed to making a deal when it comes to doing something permanent with DACA, doing something for border security. He wants to end chain migration in the visa lottery system and really make sure that we're taking steps so that we don't have to do this all over again in 2 years and that we're actually correcting the problem.
But when they came over with the bipartisan proposal, there was a sense that the Republicans sense that the president was for it at 10:30, but by the time he arrived in the afternoon, he wasn't. Was there enough there to build on, or do you have to start all over again?
Look, I think there's certainly something to build on. I think the meeting at the White House that the press was invited into was certainly a great foundation, a great starting place. And I think you saw a lot of members voice the same opinions of being committed to getting something done. And hopefully they'll be serious about it. We've laid out what our priorities are and what we have to have happen. Look, this is a president who wants to see something done. done, but he wants to see it done right. He doesn't want to just sign something for the sake of signing something. He wants to sign something that actually makes our country better, makes our country stronger, and makes our country safer. That's what he's committed to do, and that's what we want to work with Democrats to make sure happens.
Sarah, give us a preview of what's happening today at the White House. I know there's an event with women in the Trump administration.
Yeah, so we've got about 200 women coming from all across the country joining women within the administration to do 3 separate panels talking about some of the big issues facing our country, the economy, security, and the opioid crisis. I think it's going to be an incredible event. This is both a time for us to talk about some of the things the administration has done, but also, and I think more importantly, it's a time for us to listen to these women from across the country, whether they're small business owners, stay-at-home moms, entrepreneurs, a number of different backgrounds, and hear what their concerns are and things that would help them in their everyday life. And that's what we're trying to do, is have this open forum. I think it's going to be a really great event and something we're really looking forward to.
Sounds terrific. Sarah, about 40 minutes ago here on the program, we put up a graphic. The Media Research Center has studied the big 3 networks and their evening newscast and their coverage of the Trump administration. And the graphic shows that about 90% of the time over the last year, the red line at the top for the folks looking at home, that's the negative coverage. The positive coverage has only been 8, 9, 10%. What do you make of what the big 3 are doing when it comes to covering your White House?
Look, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think it's disgraceful the way that this president is treated. If he was anybody else, the media would be going on and on, trumpeting his successes. We have the best economy we've had in decades. People are back at work. Things are going well for America. And we have a president that is putting our country first. And I think that's something that should be celebrated, not mocked, not laughed at, and certainly not attacked every second of every day. And that's something that we see day in, day out. And hopefully over the course of this year, maybe we'll have a change of heart of some of the media as they get more money in their pockets due to the massive tax cuts and tax reform that went into effect. As we move into February and they start seeing more money in their pocket, maybe that'll have a little change in their heart, too.
Well, maybe. All right.
Thank you, Sarah. Steve made your pie last night. You forgot the chocolate.
I forgot to put the chocolate in.
I'm incredibly disappointed, but I think, Ainsley, you and Brian are right that he's just looking for an excuse to make another one.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
all.
I'm glad to hear that he's sharing it with everybody.
You said don't forget the ice cream.
I brought one in last week. All right, Sarah, thank you very much. Have a good
Thanks, Sarah.
day down at the White House.
Thanks, guys.
Go get warm. Thank you.
All right, 17 minutes and a half before the top of the hour, and we've got a Fox News alert. 13 children shackled and starving inside a California home. Now neighbors are speaking out. What did they know, and did they tell anybody about it, Brian?
And we're live at the Detroit Auto Show with the latest and greatest cars on the market, including a car exactly like the one I have. It's a Lamborghini SUV that goes from 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds. Mine takes 3.5. We're going to tell you all about it.
It's frustrating when you can't see clearly. Imagine there were wiper blades that did more than just wipe away the rain.
Good morning to you. Back with some quick headlines. The risk of catching the flu is taking priority over the risk of nuclear war. The CDC postponing today's planned nuclear preparedness meeting and instead presenting a workshop on the growing flu epidemic. A 40-year-old mother and marathon runner is the latest victim to die in California. Katie Oxley Thomas passing away just 2 days after showing symptoms. The CDC says about 500 people have died from flu-related illnesses so far this season. New Jersey's incoming governor has vowed to make New Jersey a sanctuary state, but he's not stopping there. According to the Washington Post, Phil Murphy plans to create an agency called the Office of Immigrant Defensive Protection, where people can call with questions about their status. Murphy, a Democrat, will be sworn in today. That's a look at your headlines. Ainsley, send it to you.
Right. Thanks so much. A Fox News alert, a very disturbing report out of California at that house right there. They're calling it a house of horrors. Several children found starving and chained to their beds.
Obviously, the parents arrested after one of their brave daughters escaped to call police.
Gigi Graciette from our Los Angeles affiliate is live outside the horrifying scene in Paris, California. Gigi?
Good morning from Paris, California. This is about 80 miles outside of downtown Los Angeles, and the home behind me is the one you referred to, now being called a house of horror. Take a look at the pictures. Under arrest this morning, 57-year-old David Alan Turpin and his 49-year-old wife, Louise Anna, each facing 9 counts of torture and 10 counts of child endangerment after authorities say they found 12 of their 13 children, most of whom are adults, shackled to their beds inside rooms police described as dark and foul smelling in the family's home here in Paris. Police alerted to the situation after the Turpin's 17-year-old daughter escaped the house on Sunday morning and called 911, telling the dispatcher 12 of her brothers and sisters, ranging in ages from 2 to 29, were being held captive. They were found malnourished and dirty in what's being described as filthy conditions. The brothers and sisters reportedly telling police they were starving. It's a striking contrast to the photos that the family posted on their joint Facebook page, where they're seen smiling at a variety of locations, including several theme parks. Neighbors here were left stunned.
They were all in PJs because it was early in the morning. They were very, very pale skinned, like almost like they've never seen the sun. But I've seen a couple of the older ones, so they all, and it was mostly girls, and then kind of small framed, I'd say kind of tiny, almost looked a little malnutritioned.
I always had a suspicion because that house never looked like there was a lot of action in front of it.
All 13 of the Turpin children have been hospitalized. Meanwhile, their parents will face a judge on Thursday. Their bail set at $9 million each. Reporting live in Paris, California, I'm Gigi Gracia. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Gigi, thank you very much.
Still a ton of questions.
The mom looks like she's smiling in her mugshot.
Right. Makes no sense. Well, she has to be deranged. All right, 11 minutes before the top of the hour. Next on our rundown, you check yours at home. We are live at the Detroit Auto Show, where a Lamborghini is unveiled. It's the world's first super SUV. It goes from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds.
But we go from this show to Bill Hemmer in 10 minutes.
That's fast as we're going to be moving today.